Okay, it's time to discuss defending bunch tight end and PA boot over. Clearly a very effective and popular offense that, you've probably seen many videos or tips on defending it already, and they may work just fine. But if you're still struggling with it and you're looking for a different set of options, I think you'll find this one very, very interesting. The setup itself is extremely simple and requires very little of you in terms of user play, but there is a lot of nuance to explain, if you want to get some sort of understanding as to what you're actually doing. So be prepared for some excruciatingly fine details. Of course, we'll be basing this out of match quarters, which I still think is the most adaptable family of coverages if you take the time to understand it. And although there are a few good ways of setting it up, in this video I want to keep it as simple as we possibly can. It's really designed for three main components. Defending, so first and foremost, really you're defending the crossers and the tight end delay of PA boot over. So really just we're basing the coverage on PA boot over. Second, we want to be able to contain the quarterback. Obviously that's a big problem. And third, we want to keep the coverage robust so that we can defend the other things that people like to do out of this offense without having to guess and make too many adjustments if they throw something different than just PA boot over, essentially. Now, if you like this video and you're interested in more defensive breakdowns, you may be interested in joining the YouTube membership for extra in-depth videos. It already includes a 4-3 game plan, but I'll also be covering the fine details of regular gun bunch in a video later this week. You should see a join button below the video unless you're on the iOS app, in which case it won't show up and you'll have to go into a browser or something, unfortunately. Anyway, with that said, let's get into defending PA boot over. The play on defense is palms, and it's out of dime 2-3-6. Now you can do this out of other formations that have palms, but this one allows us to do something interesting in terms of containing the quarterback. Now you can use quarters instead of palms, but it has a few small issues with it that can potentially cause it to break down completely. So I would really strongly suggest finding at the very least palms and then dime 2-3-6 if you can. And you'll find this formation in most 3-4 playbooks. So right here, dime 2-3-6, palms, and we'll start with PA boot over. So before we get started, we'll talk a little bit about alignments and roles and rules and things like that. If you're here for just a quick tip, this should be time-stamped, so you should be able to find your way to that. But if you're interested in what you're doing, I think this is good to know. So I've went over this a few times in other videos in terms of how quarters and palms plays bunch coverages. So we'll start off with the strong side. This one's particularly interesting because not only is it gun bunch, but you also have this nub tight end on the other side over here that also distorts the coverage a little bit. And then in this case, with how it's designed in this game, the combination of the two is very odd and very interesting in a way. But if we know how to work with it, it can be very, very effective for us. So just on the bunch side here, we're playing a box coverage over these three receivers. In reality, if you're playing man on these guys, guys get picked, and so eventually guys run free, and it's hard to get tight coverage on these types of formations. Zone, obviously, zone has its own set of issues, so there are smart ways of running match against these compressed bunch formations. So in particular, you have box, which is the default check for quarters and palms against bunch coverages. So what you have is the quote-unquote flat defender takes the first defender out. The corner takes the first receiver out. The corner takes the second receiver out. The safety takes the second receiver in, or he's just capping everything if he doesn't have that. And then the 3-rec here takes the first receiver in. Then what you have on the weak side right here, you have the weak defender. In this case, he's actually a dime defender. So he's actually usually you'll be subbing in safeties anyway, but by default he's a safety. And actually you can sub in a cornerback there if you really want. But he's man-to-man on the running back, and if the running back's into block, he's playing the flat. And then normally against gun bunch, the corner has the solo guy man-to-man. But in this case, we get an auto check If that solo receiver has a tight split, like he's a nub tight end or in Trey Y flex, the corner and the safety will play him inside out. So if he goes out or vertical, the corner's got him. If he's running underneath or crosser, this safety should have him. Now, things get a little bit weird here because this safety is a bit of an adjuster. So he can also be there to poach any crossing routes coming from the bunch side. So you can already see where he has two responsibilities. He has responsibilities on the right in terms of covering the tight end as he breaks inside, and you also have responsibilities in terms. Well, you don't really have responsibilities, but you want him to be able to help out on crossing routes. Now, when we're looking at something like PA boot, we have 3 levels of crossing routes. And we only have so many interior defenders that are committed to that bunch side. So we don't want guys like the cornerback over here chasing crossers and posts across the field because he has a pretty hard outside leverage, so he's not going to be as good. Same with the safety, even though he's not as far outside, he usually gets burnt on crossing routes and posts and things like that. So we absolutely have to make use of this backside safety, and we don't want to user him ourselves. I know a lot of people that run quarters and palms tend to user this backside safety in 3x1. I tend to like to stay away from it just because ideally he's a set it and forget it kind of guy, that he can cover crossing routes, the routes that people like to look at, or posts over the top, and just take that out of the play. I don't want to have to manually do that and then take myself away from the more adaptable underneath types of things, the quick hitting routes that aren't as easy to cover. So we want that, and there's really a number of ways that we can get that to work, but in this video, we'll go over the one that I think is just the best for all of that. The other thing is alignments. You'll notice that this dime backer is out of the box, which is pretty annoying, especially since if we run quarters, he's actually in the box and you have this really nice alignment. But we can't really run quarters because, like I said earlier, it has a few bugs with it. But, it can be good in some situations in terms of covering the running back to the flat. But if you are coming up against somebody that's running the ball out of this formation, you can just move him inside as well. It's not that big of a deal. You can also man align, but sometimes that kind of screws things up a little bit. So I would just call palms as it is, and if you want to be a little bit stronger against the run, you can either move him in, or you can take this weak side safety and just plug him in there, and he can be that C-gap defender in a little bit of a better position. So you kind of actually look like a cover 3, but we are running quarters behind that. And the other thing, before we start to actually show this stuff, for most of this video, I'm going to be running this with the bunch set to the field. When it's set to the boundary, this coverage does very, 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 very well. So we need to kind of plan for the worst case scenario. So the worst case is when the bunch is set to the field. So most of these issues don't arise when you are coming up against trips to the boundary, so we're just going to be doing it to the field. So with that being said, let's reset this play and then let's get to the actual stuff. Okay, let's just start with how this works if you just run it stock. So let's actually do quarters. I think most people, if they try some of this match cover 4 stuff against this, they'll call cover 4 quarters without adjustments, and they'll come across something like this. So they'll run the tight end of the delay fade, which pins that contained defender inside. You'll be able to escape, and you'll have a number of openings on the sideline. So you see right here, the guy crossing short doesn't really get covered properly. I mean, he doesn't usually go through the offensive line like this. It's usually a little bit cleaner, but he's open there. The backside safety right here, and this is actually true for any of these nub formations like trips tight end or Trey Y flex. If the tight end is set to the boundary, he just, he doesn't notice these crossers for whatever reason. So we can't count on him really in when we're playing quarters. Okay, so that's, a bug, and hopefully that'll be out of the game at some point. But for now, we can't count on him and in even other route combinations, it's unpredictable, so we can't count on him, so we really just can't use the coverage altogether. So, he beats the safety. So we don't have the backside safety. The crosser beats this safety, so we also can't rely on him covering any sort of crossing route. And then you also have the post over here that beats this corner that has outside leverage. And this outside leverage is nice against, sail and things, corner routes to that side, but in this case, it's not very good. Okay, so now we'll go with palms. So same thing. Let's get to the outside. And let's throw this post over the top now. Overthrew that, but you see how that was open. So in this case, the first to flat player does a better job. I can't tell you why, I don't really understand, but he does a better job of actually covering this shallow crosser. The 3-rec, covers him tightly until you can pass him off. If for whatever reason this guy had to match the running back, this 3-rec will carry him across the field. Now, that's already might be, giving you some questions in terms of who do I actually use here, and to be honest, I don't know. I think this coverage does a great job on its own, to the point that maybe you should even just use their defensive line, or maybe this flat defender, just to let it do its thing. And you can just sit and watch pretty much. The crosser here, he smokes the safety again, but you do get help from the backside guy. Okay, so right here it's not so great, but it should be better with adjustments. Plus, even here it's not great, but if you threw that, if you have a little bit of speed or some abilities like acrobat or deep out knockout, this isn't going to be a catch, but with our adjustment it should be a little bit tighter. And then over here we still had the post. So sometimes, if they don't throw it well, these guys can peel off and undercut that. Or you could get an overthrow like I got, but obviously you can't rely on that stuff. So what we need to do, essentially, we need to get this corner to not match without changing his assignment, because his assignment is really good against corner routes. So we need the safety to take over on the post, which right now he doesn't. And then we need this guy to hold his own against the crosser, essentially. And before getting into that, we also need to be able to defend one of these common cover 4 box beaters, where if you have some sort of combination like this, where 3 is on like a curl or a dig or something, and then you have a streak from the point guy, that you can bug out that safety and get beat over the top. So that's something else we want to keep in mind. So like I said, this really isn't much of an issue to the boundary. And there are a few different ways of going about this, but what I think is the best thing to do is to put the star, so this guy right here, on a curl flat. Not a seam flat, not a hard flat, cloud flat, or anything. He has to be a curl flat. Now, I can't explain why this happens. I have a few hunches, but I don't know exactly why. But it makes our coverage much, much better. The other thing is, and we don't need this until later on in the video when we go back to that box bug, we'll also just press him individually. So it's triangle, X, triangle, and then down on the right stick, just to disrupt the release of the middle guy. Now, if you run this thing again, we'll show you how it works out. And we'll try to throw this guy right here, but the safety's all over it. So, same thing right here. The shallow crosser is taken by the first to flat defender. The crosser is taken by the safety. And you see he's, a little bit closer than before. But you see if you try to throw that, he's right on him. And if you have anything like pick specialist or deep out knockout or acrobat, you can knock that out or get a pick on that as well. It's actually nice because it looks like maybe it's a little bit open and you have nothing else open, so you end up just going to that. But anyway. And then obviously right here, what we're able to do is get the corner off of that post, meaning that this safety takes over and he's got inside leverage on that post. So you can't throw that as well. Now, this is a really important note to make. The rating of this backside safety actually matters in a strange way. If he has 80 or more man coverage, he doesn't match that crosser nearly as well. So it's very strange. but it's just what the case is right here. Now, again, this isn't an issue if the bunch is set into the boundary, but it is an issue if you have the bunch set to the field. So I'll show you what it looks like. So again, the same adjustment, just one simple adjustment. Same thing right here, and you'll see that he'll match the crosser, but he'll just let him pass and give him much more space. So really, I would strongly recommend going to get one of those safeties that have a lot of speed, like the Brian Dawkins, but have less than 80 man coverage. Now, if you're playing rags or something like that, that'll be much easier, but for MUT, definitely go out and get those guys. Okay, let's talk about the tight end delay fade right here. So obviously this is kind of this serves two purposes, this delayed fade. You know, it cancels out contains, so it allows you to escape the pocket and get better throwing angles. But you know, if these routes are covered right here, it gives you kind of a last option to throw the ball, obviously. So if those shallow crossers covered by the money backer back here, if the backside safety is covering the crosser and the strong safety is covering the post, obviously there will be nothing you really want to throw. So then the last option is that tight end delay fade. And if you remember from the start of the video, the corner essentially has that tight end if he's running, you know, anything outside or anything, you know, like a streak or a fade. But because he's in match coverage, it doesn't work like traditional man coverage where you see there's a bug that he'll convert to a spy and chase after the quarterback, leaving his coverage assignment completely open. In this case, he actually sits and waits for that delay fade, and then he will be there to cover that. In addition, you also have help from the three receiver hook in the middle there as well. But you know, usually you don't really need that, or you know, you're using that yourself and you have nothing else to cover, and you can use a tight end fade yourself. But the way it'll work out, and let me just do the same adjustments over here. Just curl flat that guy, and then you'll obviously want to press him to. So here, hopefully I can get the tight end to actually delay fade. So in this case, I wasn't able to actually release him in time. So what happened in this instant, I don't know why, but the tight end wouldn't release for me. So what happened was the corner actually just peeled off and did his own thing over here. And then the MAC, or the three receiver hook, picked up his responsibility essentially. So even when things break down, this coverage kind of fixes itself in a lot of cases. So in this case, it was actually nice. I mean, you might be using this guy anyway, so in which case you'd be a little bit closer to that delay fade, but let's see if we can get him to release earlier. So I don't know how people run this, but for me, he's just always getting stuck. I don't know if it's just a product of how this defense runs, how the front runs, but he's having a lot of difficulty releasing right here. So if I go out, try to release him, try to release him, try to release him, he just does not want to release. I don't know why. So this in itself, you know, might be good defense for this, where he just does not seem to be releasing. Let's just run it one more time here against non-contains. Okay, so in this case, I got him, and then the corner is able to match him up the field, but you know, it's completely ridiculous at that point. So I think that's it for the routes on PA boot over. Again, you have all sorts of different crossers covered. Just by making one adjustment, you're able to rotate the assignments essentially to defenders that are in much better positions to cover that. Anyway, so let's go against that box bug that I showed you at the beginning of the video, where we were able to get the point man free above. In this case, we're able to disturb his release so that he gets a late release, and then by that time the safety can catch up essentially, and then you know, you're behind the guy and you got to try to make an aggressive catch on him. So that's the reason why we do that essentially, because if we don't press, now you know, you'd have to come across somebody that really knows what they're doing in terms to beat this. But if you don't press, you know, you can get beat over the top like that. So keep that in mind if you're coming up against somebody that is good. Then again, before we get into the contain stuff, we want to quickly go over the other types of routes that you might see, just to show you the robustness of this coverage. So if we go to something like inside switch here, where we have corner right here and a table route, right? The table route is great against any of the intermediate or deeper zones, but in this case, the money backer has him man-to-man. So he transitions a little bit late, but if you have a good enough defender right there, he can make a play and pick that ball off. And then likewise, this backside corner here plays those tight end routes really, really well. So, if you're playing zone coverage, you have to kind of pick, are you covering the table route or the corner route? But if you're playing quarters on that side, it does a really, really good job here where they get great leverage on both of those routes. So if they want to run any outbreaking routes on that side, no chance. Sometimes, you can convert the table route for a yard or two, but nothing really there. And if you want outward breaking routes on this side, like if you're running sail, and let's just go ahead and do these adjustments over here. The corner, I've showed this many, many times, but the corner does a fantastic job of covering those corner routes right here. Again, to the point, you almost don't need to do anything. Now, because you are zoning off this guy over here, that means this safety won't chase the tight end underneath. So you can come across situations where he is able to find space underneath this curl flat. But, if that 5-yard pass is all they have, I think you're pretty good there. And let's end off with contains. Obviously, you've seen this in many of your games, I'm sure. Even if you have a contain on the edge here, and even if it's a fast guy, it doesn't really matter because his assignment will get canceled by this delay fade. Plus, he'll get the double team, and then you'll just be able to get outside really, really easily. So what can we do to actually get a good contain? So we obviously have to play around with what we're given. This formation in particular, dime 2-3-6, is one of the only, I think, in the game that allows you to move your edge defenders or your defensive end, which are actually outside linebackers in this case, without them moving back. So what I'm going to do is contain, right? Just like this, it's not good. But if I kick him out, and if I kick him way out wide, somewhere ridiculous over here, he is going to be attracting the tight end, and you'll be allowed to have a contain from your interior guy. So you're not getting that delay fade bugging your contain mechanic. He has to, go out here and block this outside guy over here, leaving your contain guy free in a lot of cases to come at the quarterback, or if the tight end struggles to pick this guy up, he can also make a play on that quarterback. But what you'll see here is that a lot of the times that contain is able to loop around, and you're just not able to get around him really. Now, I find that this isn't the absolute most consistent thing. It might depend on precise placement. You might want to play around with that, but I just kick him out way out here, and this guy is able to loop around that tackle a little bit. And honestly, the coverage at that point maybe doesn't even matter because you can't roll out right there, right? You can't ever get to the point that you can even throw those crossers or those posts. So that's one cool thing. Now, if you do run this and they don't put the tight end on the delay fade, so if they catch on to this, they might just actually put him on a route, and then you can't get as good contain. I mean, that edge guy still does a pretty good job. So, if they're mixing things up a little bit, not always running that, it might not be the best option, especially if they're actually running the ball inside. Maybe you don't want to be kicking one of your box defenders way out wide. But if you want to be much, much more solid against that rollout, this is a great option for that. And obviously, if you're running this at a nickel normal or other nickel sets, you just can't do that. Another thing you can do is contain and just press and blitz that corner. So what this will do, I think this is a common adjustment. It frees up the contain guy to work on the tackle. So if for whatever reason you want another option, that is there as well. Now, in terms of PA boot over, we don't really need that corner other than to, catch that delay fade when it's coming back. But, we can do other things like, we can take this guy ourselves and we can user him over here and, do what we want and cover that ourselves if we're doing something like this. And then if they end up switching it, running something like this, if we see the tight end release, we can just, be a little bit more careful against his tight end route, because although the safety will pick him up, he won't do as good of a job as the corner does. But that's just there if you need it, just press and blitz him. Now that that money backer right there kind of gets in the way a little bit, and things can get a little bit messy. But in general, I mean, the coverage itself is totally fine. You almost don't need rollout defense, but if you want to make sure that he's not in your way, simply just contain, move this guy way out, and you'll see that, you know, this guy just loops around and gets at the quarterback. Or you can just leave it, contain, press, and blitz the cornerback. That's a good method of doing these things as well. Okay, so a little bit extensive, but ultimately I think it's simple enough and robust enough to keep you solid against this crazy offense that we're seeing. Yeah, more on bunch coming soon in the members video, more of the traditional gun bunch stuff. There are some interesting nuances there as well that I didn't go over here, but they also apply here as well. So definitely keep an eye out for that as well. But anyway, that's it for this, and I'll see you guys in the next one.